Uh, and as usual, lots to talk about the harvest. In the top story, it says the CO2 level reaches its highest level in more than 4 million years.
Oops.
Yes, oops. In technology, is this
Here
a
we have
game changer? Who have we got? Yeah, Clive and
Clive and Loretta.
Good. And in technology, apparently, aluminum ion batteries with graphene are soon going to hit the consumer test market. Could this be a game changer? On materials, an ultra high density hard drives, they're made with graphene and they store far more data, 10 times more data. That's a lot. Now, here in terms of space, there's a fully reusable 3D printed rocket. It's called the Terranar. 3D printed rocket. Wow. Now, I haven't heard about Ohio in this, but soon it'll be home to the largest solar factory complex outside of China. Back to biology. Apparently, puppies are wired to communicate with us. Our human story this week is the question, are we ready to take advantage of benevolent AI? And the final one on health. Why was an Alzheimer's drug approved? Confounding the research community. Interesting. So, Richard, back to the top. What is this about carbon dioxide reaching its highest level in more than 4 million years?
Well, we have set a new peak for our global atmospheric carbon dioxide. This year, the number is 419 parts per million at its peak. Somebody has their microphone on, and could you turn it off? Maybe it's you, Clive, because it's giving a lot of feedback. Okay, thank you. Anyway, so 419 parts per million, and that peak is higher than the planet has seen for the last 4.5 million years. So I think that's pretty high. And when they started taking measurements in 1958, the CO2 was at 316 ppm. So in the last 70 years, it's gone up by about 25%. And in the beginning of the industrial age, a couple of hundred years ago, it was 280 parts per million. So in the first 100 years of the industrial age, we added 36 parts per million. And in the last 70 years, that's accelerated tremendously, and we've added 103 parts per million to our air. And even though we had a nice pandemic last year, that didn't lower the trajectory of the CO2. So we need bigger pandemics, I guess. And the ultimate control knob, they say, to all this carbon in the atmosphere is fossil fuel emissions. And this is just another sign that we need cuts that are much larger and more sustained than anything we've ever done so far. Or this will be the good old days.
Any thoughts? So how did we get thoughts when we only have two other people?
Wait. Sorry, I was muted. I wanted to ask something. Were any readings taken during the 6 months into the pandemic when actually the world closed down?
Yeah, they were lower to begin with, but it still has not done anything to affect the total parts per million. It's just like they were lower, which meant we weren't fucking it up as bad, as fast.
Yeah.
Okay, then, Richard, moving on to our coronavirus stories. Am I interrupting somebody?
No, it's just that something's wrong with the sound somehow. Are we all muted? Yeah, we are.
Okay. Moving along from that sort of gloomy prediction, was it a prediction? I don't know. Into technology. Now, what's this about aluminum ion batteries with graphene perhaps being a game changer for battery technology?
Well, it's a new battery technology, and it's one that doesn't use any precious, rare materials that are controlled by the Chinese and all these other players, and they use something that is abundant and recyclable. Instead of lithium, they're using aluminum. And I guess when your battery is old, you can crush it up and recycle it and make beer cans out of it. And these aluminum ion batteries, one of the things that is fascinating about them is they use graphene in the structure, so they're using advanced materials to be able to make them. And as a result of this, there is 3 times the energy density of lithium ion batteries. That means it's also 3 times heavier, so you don't get any kind of free energy, but it can be certainly smaller, which is useful, or if you have it bigger, then it'll take your vehicle 1,000 miles. It also, charging is 20 to 60 times faster. So you have something that certainly you can charge up to a full charge in just a few minutes instead of a few hours. That eliminates one of the issues with these batteries. There's no even overheating issues. Lithium ion batteries occasionally burst into flame and things like that, which are not very good for the consumer sitting on your car that bursts in flames. And it looks like that these batteries will have a lot longer life than the lithium ion batteries. The lithium ion batteries lose about 20% out of their capacity after 1,000 cycles. That's charging them and running them and charging them every day for 3 years. Then the batteries lose that much capacity. Small versions of these batteries have been charged over 2,000 recycled charges without losing any charges. So there's better long-term performance. And again, aluminum is abundant, and the material that the batteries are made of is recyclable. And there is real consumer testing that is going to start in the next few months. And maybe there are new technologies, maybe Tesla's giant gigafactories making a big portion of the batteries in the world are all obsolete. That's the problem in these technology games, is a new technology makes everything that you presently do, including all of your equipment, obsolete, and it's got to go on the junk pile. So, oh well. So anyway, this potentially is a game changer in the battery business for many reasons, not the least of which it's much more environmentally positive, and the fast recharge cycle makes it a much better alternative. So, what do we think?
Well, it's amazing how
Say on that.
quickly
Oh,
lithium ion replaced the NiCad batteries, the nickel cadmium. They've
Yes.
pretty much disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe these things will replace lithium ion just as quickly.
Right. And in an area like this, though it is new technology, there is so much demand for batteries. They're saying the battery demand will increase by a factor of 10 over the next decade. So there is a lot of room in the market for new things. And in this kind of situation, you can have a new technology that nobody heard of last week take over real fast.
From battery technology to hard drive technology, also made with graphene. Could this be a game changer? Because apparently you say it can store 10 times more data.
Yes, graphene strikes again. And here they're not using graphene for any of its mysterious quantum effects. They're using graphene because it's thin and smooth. The way that the disk drives work is you have a head and a platter, and the platters spin around and the head reads them. And it turns out how much data that you can get on the disk is a function of how close you can get the heads to the disks. And so one of the things that's been happening over the last 20 years is they've been getting better at making the disk surfaces real flat, and been able to, there is a separator layer between the disk media and the heads that they have made much thinner. And because of that, the heads can fly low. And if they can fly low, they get more data out of the disk drive. It turns out if you replace the coating over the magnetic material on the disk with a layer of graphene, and one atom thick is pretty thin, so the heads get to fly very low, and it looks like that they can get 10 times the capacity in the hard disk over what they have now. So your 1 terabyte hard disk drive in your laptop that was so amazing a few years ago could be a 10 terabyte disk drive. And so one of the things also that the graphene is smoother, and so there is a less friction and a reduction in the wear rate, so the disk drives will certainly last at least twice as long. So just generally, they are more powerful and more reliable. It also, one of the things that is kind of interesting is that presently in 2020, they sold disk drives worth 1 billion terabytes. So there's a lot of data that is still being stored on these disks. And now we can have 10 billion terabytes, which means you won't be able to find anything.
Doesn't help. It's not really good for photography hoarders. who have our computers so full. This will give us even more way to save stuff.
Well, I suspect how it will show up is that the quality of the videos will continue to get higher so they can be on the big screen TVs. And as the video gets better resolution, the files are a lot bigger and you need to store them somewhere. I think if you look around the world, probably you would find a significant percentage of all disk storage capacity in the world is used to store these stinking videos.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So would we need to get new computers?
Oh, this one, you wouldn't need to get a computer, but you could get a new disk drive. But what will happen for most people is one day when they buy a computer, the disk drive that comes with it is suddenly much bigger than what they used to see.
And how long from now is this going to happen?
I think it'll take 2 or 3 years.
Oh, okay.
Because you still have to move it from where it is now into something that is in production. And so there's a lot involved between figuring out how to do it and then doing it where you're making a zillion of these things every day.
And that'll tend to be more desktop computers rather than notebooks or tablets, because
Right.
notebooks and tablets are all solid state now.
Right.
They're all what?
Solid state memory.
And so even now, many computers are solid state memory. I have a solid state drive on my laptop, and it makes it it's faster starting up and faster operating and more reliable. Okay.
Have difficulty deciding which category to put something under, because this next one is about space, but it's also about 3D printing. And it's a rocket that can be 3D printed. It's called the Terran R. What's that about?
Well, Elon Musk has some new competition that's coming up. Terran R is made by a company, Relativity Space, which you really probably have not heard about before. And Relativity Space has as its overall ambition to use 3D printing to print rockets and then be able to use those rockets to build humanity's industrial base on Mars. So their long range plan, like Elon Musk's long range plan, involves Mars. They think 3D printers are going to be a key technology on Mars, and I guess they're just trying to get started on the ground floor. And excuse me, I have a friend who's in the hospital, and I'm going to take the call quickly. Hello, Charlie. I lost him, but I lost his call. I didn't lose my friend. I'm going to try again. I'm sorry. Hello, Charlie. I'm in the middle of hot science. I'll call you back as soon as it's over. Are you home now? Very good. Very good. I'll call you back in a little bit. That's Charlie. He's home now. So, a friend with sudden heart trouble, and now he's home. Anyway, so this particular rocket that Relativity Space is making is their second version of it, and this is really at the cutting edge of rocket innovation and design. It's fully reusable, and it's entirely 3D printed. Even the case that the rocket is in is 3D printed, as well as the motors. And then their target is the satellite business, and this one is powerful enough that it competes with the big popular SpaceX rocket. And so when this comes fully online in 2 or 3 years, SpaceX will have a real competitor. The engines burn liquid oxygen and methane, and this approach to building them, they are able to build rockets that have 100 times fewer parts. And if you've ever been involved in any manufacturing of anything, you would understand what a profound statement that is. If you make it with fewer parts, you have something that is simpler and faster to build. They can build these rockets in about 60 days. Many of the other ones take a year or more to build. And this particular rocket is 216 feet tall. Its payload is more than 44,000 pounds. So if you had one of the big military tanks, it could put that tank into orbit. And its capacity is very close to the SpaceX Falcon 9. And let's see, what else? The entire rocket, the first stage, the second stage, and the payload fairing, that's the thing that comes apart to let the payload out. Those are all reusable. And so the rocket will end up being also lower in cost, and I doubt if Elon Musk can compete with it on a cost basis, because the rockets will be basically cheaper to build and cheaper to launch. So and they're getting their 3D printers ready to deploy on Mars. So what more do you want? We lost your voice, Fred. We still lost your voice, but so what do you guys think about the 3D printed satellite launcher?
I'm boggled, absolutely boggled. I mean, how big would the 3D printing, I have to learn more about this. How big would it have to be? The ones I've seen are in libraries and they're this big. Like I'm not putting it together.
Well, this rocket is 216 feet long. It's made in at least 2 different segments. I don't think it has to be 100 feet long, because they just printed a little bit at a time, but it's a good question.
There was a video on the on that article, and it showed them making the rocket engine, and it looked like a 3D printer about the size of a refrigerator.
Okay.
And so it may be components of the rocket that they're making, the complicated ones, because they're talking about reducing the part count,
right,
and things like that.
And again, they're making everything, the nozzles and the fuel system and all of that stuff is printed.
And it looked like it was a laser sintering type process.
Okay, okay. And what he says for the laser sintering, that's where the 3D printer spits out some stuff and you use the laser to fuse it. You heat it up to fuse it. I wonder how they did that with the side of the rocket, you know, the shell the rocket's in, because if it's 3D printed entirely, then the shell is 3D printed too, and that must be the laser sintering that they use to fuse the metal into something solid.
Well, and lots of times they use the laser to just kind of glue the components together,
Right.
and then they take it out of the 3D printer, and they still need to put it in an oven to get it to properly sinter.
To anneal, right.
And then there's shrinkage issues and other things like that they have to take into account.
Right. So it isn't as, you don't just turn your 3D printer on and print out your rocket. There are more details involved.
Jeez. I'm still figuring out microwave ovens. Oh my God.
Okay, the microwave oven going to Mars.
Wow.
So Richard, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
I wonder what the problem was. Anyway, what's this about Ohio and a huge solar factory complex?
Well, the only company left in the U.S. that is making solar panels is a company, First Solar. And they're big in the Toledo area, and now they're starting to build their third plant and double their U.S. manufacturing capacity. It'll be a state-of-the-art plant to make solar panels, and it's going to have pretty good capacity. It will be able to make one solar module every 2.8 seconds. And they're mainly going to supply the U.S. market for solar panels. The countries around the world, certainly the U.S., as you try to go to net zero, there is an enormous amount of solar power that is going to be installed everywhere in the world. And these guys say there's going to be enough business in America that they're building, they think, what is the biggest plant ever, and it's just going to supply America. They're not going to have any leftover to export. And also, in the solar panel business, right now, China largely dominates the supply chain. That's the components that are used to make these solar panels. However, First Solar is not at all dependent upon China for these materials, so they also have their own supply chain. So I think this is a big deal. They also, they're trying to open up now in America, and in America, labor is starting to become precious, and because they feel potentially constrained by not getting enough skilled workers, they're investing heavily in automation, so it'll end up being a very highly automated plant. And as I say, they're going to need all the capacity they can get because they're trying to catch up with the demand for solar panels, and that's still going to go through the roof for the next 20 years.
Isn't it funny? Isn't it funny? We've been trying to do this for years and years and years. And all of a sudden, China gets going. And all of a sudden, we're trying to catch up. It's like we needed a little impetus just to get us moving. And, I think I see a lot of nice energy and so far aiming towards that solar and, stuff like that.
Now, there was some time, maybe a decade ago, maybe 15 years ago, I'm not sure exactly when, but China looked ahead and decided that this solar panel business was going to be enormous, and they saw it as a big opportunity for Chinese industry, and they invested in so much capacity. They actually had more capacity than the world could take, and then when that happened, then prices go down because they want to keep their factories busy. And so now I think China has a different problem because technologies are changing, and the Chinese factories now are starting to get old and dated. There's a new kind of technology, a different kind of crystal than the silicon crystals that they're using called perovskites. And that's the new technology for solar panel. Recently, in some place like Poland, they have just are opening up a giant new plant to use this new kind of solar panel technology, perovskites. And again, people around the world are seeing the opportunities and investing now, and that means they get to use the technology we have now, which China didn't have 10 years ago.
Richard, do you know where the panels are manufactured that are available here in Mexico?
I bet China.
Really?
I don't know, but I bet they're the main manufacturers in the world.
Oh.
But then in a few years, maybe it'll be Ohio, Toledo, Ohio.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
The solar capital of the world.
But one thing the article did say was that the whole thing hinges on tariffs to prevent cheap solar panels coming in and federal subsidies to support solar.
Right.
Which is probably still a good thing. Keep the money in the family kind of thing.
Well, also, Biden wants to have a domestic supply of solar panels. It's a key technology, and if you give that over to other countries, then you don't have your own future in your hands.
Is it, when you compare solar panels to windmills, is one a lot better than the other? And will one be eliminated, or does it depend and we need both?
I think we need both because the sun doesn't shine all the time, but the wind blows a lot when the sun doesn't shine. And if you look at it, there are these wind panels they have now. The wind generators are very big and able to generate a lot of power, but not enough power and not enough hours of the day. I don't really know what the cost comparison is by the time you're through making the investment you need in the plant. You can figure, but
one day when you drive across the countryside, you're either going to see fields full of windmills or fields full of solar panels.
Yes, in the San Francisco Bay Area where I lived before I retired, if you go over areas, Altamont Pass was famous for all the wind turbines 20 years ago.
It seems as though I just was traveling around both Massachusetts and Vermont, and it seems as though a lot of the area that was it might have been farm at one point, but it's all solar. You ride for miles and it's solar, and I'm like,
interesting.
So that might be like the new crop these days.
Uh-huh.
And probably a lot easier for farmers.
Now, I have heard one of the things that they're doing with solar and farms is spacing out the solars enough to continue to have a farm around them, and that gives you a couple of advantages in your farm. You can grow some crops that have to be in the sun all the time between the panels, and some crops that need a little bit of shade under the panels.
Sounds a little tricky for those farmers, but perhaps.
Richard, what's this biology story about puppies being wired to communicate with us?
Well, you know what it's like when you go into a pet store and this puppy just starts interacting with you so much that you want to take it home. And it turns out that these dogs, man's best friend, they're called because how good they are at interacting with people, these skills are present shortly after birth instead of being something the dog learns. So the dogs are genetically modified dogs that are modified to be biologically prepared to interact with human beings in these ways that we all know of. And so they did careful studies of dogs and found that most of these behaviors that are things like dogs' ability to follow pointing motions are genetic and not things they learn. So I think that's real interesting. Now, one of the things they also found when they did this study was there's a part of dog behavior when they have a problem, an adult dog will look to their humans to help them solve the problems. Wolves, though, if wolves have a problem, they'll try to solve it independently. Even if they know people, they'll still try to do it themselves. Those are what wolves are like. But puppies don't know yet how to seek this help from their humans. That is a human relationship ability that they learn in their life. But their ability to look at you and make eye contact and wag their tail, they're born with that.
Thoughts?
Well, I mean, how can you resist? I mean, you just have to look at them. I mean, they don't have to do a damn thing. I've been doing animal rescue for 25 years. At one point, I had 57 animals in my apartment. I mean,
oh, God.
I'm sorry. You know, I mean, they just look at you and you're screwed.
Uh-huh.
Oh, God. Like
So
me, you know, when they say that people are attracted if you have that youthful looking baby face, and puppies are the same. They have those like big eyes and big head relative to the body. I don't know. I mean, I know that's not what the article is about.
But, yes. But the article is about there is this emotional connection that they know how to make from the time they're born.
And it's made them a very successful species.
Mhm.
And
Yes.
evolution has played a part in this. The ones that are better able to attract communication with humans are the ones that get to breed.
Yes. Yes.
And look at the therapy dogs. I mean, there's definite different kind of dogs that are sort of geared towards a therapy dog. I just read an article or something. A funeral home has a dog.
Oh, great.
And the dog just walks around, and they just talked about how, blood pressure, everything just
Yes.
relaxed.
They're also using these kind of therapy dogs in college environments because it turns out college kids are under a lot of stress, and there are colleges that have rooms that have you can go there and be with the dog and kind of chill out.
Nice.
Richard, well, I wonder, are there any things other than dogs that do this? Because I remember a while ago reading about horses being used in nursing homes that would go from one off to another, consoling people.
Well, I'm sure we have horses. We probably, if somebody owns cats, they would say something about the cats. One of the other animals that we have associate with but don't have very good relationships might also be able to do it, and that is pigs.
No, I've heard about that.
So you could have your therapy pig.
Yeah.
I have several friends that have pigs, and they say they're smarter than dogs. So,
Okay.
unless you have the experience yourself, what do we know, really?
Okay, but the pigs don't wag their tails, do they?
Well, they kind of go.
It's probably hard for them to share their natural environment with human beings. I mean, we don't. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if pigs like to live in the mud or that's just what pigsties are like. So I saw some wild pigs in India. They didn't live in the mud.
It's just that we can get away with having them live in the mud, but they wouldn't choose it.
Well, the reason they live in the mud is one of the ways you feed pigs is to slop them, and that is give them all of your household waste and have them recycle it.
I don't know about having a pig jump up on my lap, though.
Okay, I'd want a little pig for that.
Depends how old it is and how, but yeah.
Richard, if we want to move on to us, not just with puppies, what's this about AI, benevolent AI, and can we take advantage of it? What's that all about?
Well, I think it's interesting, and though the article is about AI, at least ostensibly, it really is about people. And so what they have found is that basically people generally are not very willing to cooperate and compromise with machines, except that people expect that AI is going to be benevolent and trustworthy. And so these behavioral scientists have looked carefully at that. These were scientists from the University of London, and they did a large-scale study on people and their behavior and cooperation with AI systems. And what they found was upon the first encounter, people have the same level of trust towards AI as they do with people. The difference, though, comes afterwards, and that is that people are much less ready to reciprocate with AI and instead exploit its benevolence to their own benefit. So it's like it goes with this. We start off acting like I trust you and you trust me, and then the relationship gets on a good footing. And with people, that relationship of mutual trust and mutual cooperation continues because there are benefits to it. One example of that might be what happens when you go into a crowded roundabout or intersection. Then you're able to get through it even though it's filled with cars, and you're able to get through it because some kind soul slows down and makes a space for you. So in that way, there's this cooperation that goes on between strangers, and the general expectation is that I cooperate with you, and I expect you to cooperate with me. And so that's kind of how we work, and that's a significant part of being human. It turns out with AI systems, though, it's different. We start off, I cooperate and you cooperate, and then if the AI just continues to be nice, then people will abuse that poor little AI system and try to get the most out of it and to try to take advantage of it. And I don't know whether it's because they see the computer as soulless or because the AI does not engage in what they call tit for tat behavior. Tit for tat is where if you're nice to me, I'll be nice to you. And if you're shitty to me, I'll be shitty right back. And the social scientists like tit for tat behavior because that's a way you can make a stable society. And maybe the problem with these EIs in the survey is the AIs were being nice all the time, and when you were being crappy, they weren't being crappy back to you. I know my wife is a little worried about AI with children because what happens with a child when the child can always say, Alexa, do this, Alexa, do that? Is that good training for life? Part of what interests me about this story is that it really reflects upon people and how people behave and how technology both uses the way that people behave and kind of messes it up too, giving us something entirely new to deal with. So maybe what we need back into the AI situation where people don't cooperate with the AI. Imagine the time of automated cars, and now you have some automated car that is trying to get into the traffic on the roundabout, and the person looks over and knows that's just a computer, and I'm not going to cooperate with that computer. There's no benefit in it for me, and so I'm not going to let him in.
You're not the boss of me?
That's right. Is this the world that we're leading to?
But it seems like you're implying that the computer has feelings. And if they might say, hey, wait a minute, I'm tired. Leave me alone for a while.
But I don't know if this implies, if looking at behavior implies feeling. I understand what you're saying, but I certainly don't mean it this way. It really is a stimulus response, I think.
It doesn't surprise me in the least that human beings start being selfish with very little encouragement. But the other thing with driving, sometimes you bully people into letting you in.
Sometimes you have to.
I wonder, yeah, I wonder, is AI going to learn to bully humans?
Uh-huh. Well, again, we need. I think we need AI that has a little bit of tit for tat programming. So, if you're too nasty, you'll start get them where they don't cooperate.
Interesting, really interesting. Wow. But you're right about kids. I mean, dealing with the parents. I mean, hopefully the parents put limits.
But Alexa doesn't.
No.
The time will come when you have to suck up to your computer.
Windows, please restart.
You know, my 2-year-old granddaughter. Yeah.
You're going to have to start saying please and thank you to Alexa.
Yes.
And how many times does that happen? All right, well, I've sent your text. Thank you.
Well, with Carol, when we were talking about it, I was saying that she should patent the idea and then suggest it to Amazon, where you could program your Alexa a little bit differently. So, for example, you could make sure your kids always said please.
No idea.
So there would be a button on it, and you could go into polite mode.
So, Richard, for our last story, what's the controversy around this Alzheimer's drug being approved?
Well, the first part of the controversy is that every drug before this that has been approved because they made some underlying disease better. And Alzheimer's drugs, they've been working on Alzheimer's drug for a long time, and there are many that have been proposed and been tested and have not been approved, and these are the ones that deal with the amyloid plaque and different things to deal with amyloid plaque. This particular drug is one that makes the amyloid plaques decrease, and it was approved by the FDA because it made the amyloid plaques decrease, not because it made Alzheimer's patients remember better. And there were studies that were done that really were inconclusive. One of them showed it made no difference with Alzheimer's. One of them showed that it made a little difference with some of them. And so in normal drug approval, they would say, okay, give me more data. That's inconclusive. But there is so much pressure on Alzheimer's now because there are things that can relieve the symptoms for a while, but there are no treatments that deal with the causes. And their predominant theory is this beta amyloid is the cause because it accumulates in the brains of people that have Alzheimer's, so it's something they can see. The only problem with this theory is that everything that they have tried to do to reduce the amount of plaque or slow its growth down or interfere it in different ways, none of them, I repeat, none of them has done anything to improve the condition of the Alzheimer's patient. So the scientific evidence for approval of this particular drug is weak at best. It's weak enough that a couple of senior long-term FDA officials resigned because of the approval. And again, this was the first case where any drug was approved for some kind of measurable thing that didn't include making the patients better. And it still was approved under some emergency rules. And one of the fears is these pharmaceutical companies will use this as an example to try to get more drugs that they're working on approved with this fast track system where a lower standard of proof is necessary. And so we're going to open ourselves up to an enormous amount of risk there with our drug approval. And one of the scientists involved said that he thinks this is going to set medical research back by 20 years. So he's saying changing the way that the drugs are approved, particularly this change, is not going to help our health or medicine or safety or efficacy of drugs that are getting approved.
Any thoughts?
Well, Richard, it's cause and effect. No, I mean, most studies I've read, I've had Alzheimer's, my father, my mother, my grandmother, my fear, that amyloid plaques, that's all they seem to be focusing on primarily, and, you know, depressive episodes, etc. But if it does, you're saying it doesn't cure Alzheimer's, but it does help eliminate amyloid.
It reduces the plaque.
Oh, why is that? I mean,
but it doesn't gain, the Alzheimer's patients don't regain memories or regain, or even stop. It doesn't even stop the memory loss.
Okay, maybe once it's happened, you can't go back, but maybe it slows it down. I don't know.
Again, or maybe since many things have been tried to deal with amyloid plaque and none of them has made any difference in Alzheimer's patients, maybe something else is going on. That's what I believe, because, there are too many times they've gone to the plate and struck out. And after a while, you start to think this isn't it.
It might be a case of it's a good preventer, but not a good therapy in the same way that a healthy diet can improve your heart health, but it can't fix it.
Or it might be that amyloid plaque is a consequence of Alzheimer's rather than something that promotes it.
Right. So you have a correlation, as Andrew had said before, correlation does not mean causation. So Alzheimer's is correlated with the amyloid plaque, but they don't know what's going on, and there is apparently remarkably little evidence that Alzheimer's is caused by the amyloid plaque buildup.
There's a lot of people freaking out now. You know, we baby boomers are like at the time to start getting it. My dad died at 72.
And that's why the drug companies are pushing this, because this gives them another thing that they can sell and make a big pile of money. And they're going to sell them to all of us.
How many people are willing to pay or can afford to pay $56,000 a year for one medication?
How much is it?
I don't know.
Oh, I thought, yeah.
The manufacturer said it would be $56,000 a year.
Oh, God.
Oh, my God.
Okay. conversation over. I was getting a bit hopeful. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
It'd be cheaper to pay a personal servant to.
Exactly.
Get a head transplant. Oh my God.
Well, certainly if I was facing Alzheimer's for myself or somebody that I loved, I can understand somebody being desperate and trying extraordinary measures.
Right, but not when it's not really, we can't really be sure about it. It sounds more like it's not going to help than it
But
is
here,
going to help.
but they would say it's FDA approved.
That's the problem.
Well, going back to Matt's service on Sunday uncertainty, you know, how do you
Yes.
never really know the complete answers to anything? But I love discussing it. Richard, thank you so much for this. I keep saying this like I'm your acolyte or something at this point, but yes, I am.
Well, I really appreciate it, and join the Facebook page. I only have two.
I did.
Okay. Okay. Yay.
Okay, now wait, what's the Facebook page? Is it for all,
Hot Science.
Your goodies?
It's just for Hot Science. And
Okay.
what I'll be doing on it is every day I'll be posting one story.
Oh, okay.
That sounds great.
And
Yeah.
part of what I want to do is just continue to give you guys, keep feeding your curious mind.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I want to do is I spend about half of my time doing this hot science stuff, and I'm just trying to figure out how to get the most use out of it.
Mm-hmm.
We appreciate it, Richard. Thank you so much for spending so much time on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're great articles. Great articles.
Anyway, I enjoy immensely doing them, and it also gives me something interesting stuff sometimes to talk about with my wife.
Right. Hey, any more word from the YouTube police?
No, I'm very careful with YouTube police, and I don't on YouTube say anything about the virus in the things that I post. I strip out the virus sections with my video editor before I post it, so the YouTube police don't bust me.
Will you have to eradicate what you've just said?
I hope not. I'm not sure if this fits the standard of WHO approved.
Anyway, Richard, thanks a lot for the session. Thanks to everybody else for participating.
Thank you.